keeps going out too.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
too much of it. I mean, I think with the weather and everything,
Yeah.
it's going to be a pain, right?
Yeah.
Just like,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay.
It's really fun. Thank you so much.
Si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale dell'educazione nello sviluppo umano e sociale. Incoraggio in questo ambito lo sforzo dell'UNESCO per far crescere nel mondo la pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da colonizzazioni ideologiche. Una preghiera e un augurio a tutti gli educatori e le educatrici. Buon lavoro! Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale dell'educazione nello sviluppo umano e sociale. Incoraggio in questo ambito lo sforzo dell'UNESCO per far crescere nel mondo la pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da colonizzazioni ideologiche. Una preghiera e un augurio a tutti gli educatori e le educatrici. Buon lavoro! Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale dell'educazione nello sviluppo umano e sociale. Incoraggio in questo ambito lo sforzo dell'UNESCO per far crescere nel mondo la pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da colonizzazioni ideologiche. Una preghiera e un augurio a tutti gli educatori e le educatrici. Buon lavoro! Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale dell'educazione nello sviluppo umano e sociale. Incoraggio in questo ambito lo sforzo dell'UNESCO per far crescere nel mondo la pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da colonizzazioni ideologiche. Una preghiera e un augurio a tutti gli educatori e le educatrici. Buon lavoro! Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale. La pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione. Istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo
sound is
Dear ministers, ambassadors, delegates, and friends.
Il 24 gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione.
It happens to all of us. You're a perfect replacement. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you could take your seats. We're not a respectable 15 minutes late kicking off, so ideal to get going. Ministers, Excellencies, panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great thrill to welcome you to the celebration of the first ever International Day of Education. I first want to thank the lady who's just disappeared, who was in front of me here, the young harpist, Jamie Gilroy, who was playing above the din. You'll hear from Jamie again later. She's a young member of the Irish diaspora living here in New York, and I'm told on the QT, as we say in Ireland, that she's an excellent young, high-achieving senior high school girl in the Ursuline School in Rochelle. So we'll hear from Jamie again. Thank you, Jamie. It's been a real privilege to work, particularly with our colleagues from Nigeria, on the drafting of the resolution ensuring that education is upheld as a human right. We're now going to start our proceedings with two videos at the beginning. It's my privilege first to present a message from the Chair of the Elders, known to all of you, the Elders established by Nelson Mandela and following the tragic death recently of the wonderful Kofi Annan. Mary Robinson, Ireland's former president and the UN's first ever High Commissioner for Human Rights, has a message for us on this important day. So we're going to hear that brief message now, and that will be followed by a message from Pope Francis, especially for today, talking about the SDG of education. So we have two videos.
Ireland is committed to ensuring that education is upheld as a most important human right. Indeed, our own education our own development depended very much on a deep, profound understanding of education, parents supporting the education of their children above anything. And we are very proud of the Irish missionaries who went to developing countries. Some of them are still at quite an advanced age in those countries. I meet them in various African countries in particular, and they've spent 30, 40 years there. Now we have development aid workers who have followed in that path and who again emphasize the importance of education. The 2030 agenda depends on quality education, Sustainable Development Goal 4, and it's really important that we focus particularly on the education of girls, which is really very important for the sustainability of communities. And education of girls means also thinking about their menstrual periods and making sure that they can stay in school and be comfortable. And that needs a lot of support, and there are good people working on it. It's so good that there is an International Day of Education, and I'm delighted that Ireland was supportive of Nigeria in furthering the resolution last December, so that the 24th of January every year will be the International Day of Education. And I hope that it will be understood that it opens up all the other human rights. Access to education is vital, and education is a very important human right.
I understand we're now going to see the message from
Il
His Holiness
24
the Pope.
gennaio si celebra anche la prima giornata internazionale dell'educazione, istituita dalle Nazioni Unite per evidenziare e promuovere il ruolo essenziale dell'educazione nello sviluppo umano e sociale. Incoraggio in questo ambito lo sforzo dell'UNESCO per far crescere nel mondo la pace mediante l'educazione e auspico che questa sia resa accessibile a tutti e che sia integrale, libera da colonizzazioni ideologiche. Una preghiera e un augurio a tutti gli educatori e le educatrici. Buon lavoro!
Thank you. Thank you very much. Two important messages at the top, and very soon we're going to hear from His Excellency Minister Holt, Deputy Foreign Minister of Norway, from my dear colleague Tijani, my PR colleague from Nigeria, and we have a panel of speakers. I'll just make a few remarks at the top before we move into proceedings. I've already said it's a personal and professional privilege and honour to be here today. Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. I think that's something we all recognise as the wisdom of Nelson Mandela, who continues to inspire many of us in this House. My own country's involvement, Ireland's involvement in this initiative, really was born of a centuries-old and very deep tradition in Ireland of a respect for education. We used to be known as the island of saints and scholars, and indeed some historians argue that over centuries Irish monks, particularly after the fall of Rome, managed to husband the existing learning in Europe to protect some of the basic European values at the time. For generations, we have had a strong commitment to quality education, both at home and really in all of our relationships abroad. And today, further skills education is a top priority, and I know that many of our civil society partners here today are key supporters and work with us to the crucial success of that continued education and lifelong learning. We're delighted that today we are one of the founding members of the newly established Group of Friends for Education. It's really pretty remarkable that this great UN has waited this long to have a day like this. Over the past 40 years in Ireland, we've been delighted to welcome thousands of young students to study through our Irish Aid fellowships. And today in our own high schools in Ireland, we have students from over 160 nationalities. I still stop when I use this second statistic, which is that 17% of Ireland's population today is non-Irish born, so what I call new Irish. So that means that our intercultural education strategy on inclusive education enormously values this varied student cultural heritage. And in my view, we're all the richer for that in the 21st century Ireland, where our new Irish are bringing us extraordinary cultural depth and breadth. The well-known missionary tradition that you heard President Robinson speak of has spanned generations and led to our engagement in global education with UNESCO, with the Global Partnership for Education. I'm delighted that they're both with us here today. This work complements what we do at a country-level engagement with those who are most vulnerable in their access to education, children in fragile environments and girls. The way we do it in Ireland is that what we value at home, we value abroad, and we want to share that with those who most need it. Yet the reality is, and we have to face into reality, that we still have extraordinary hills to climb. Today, 103 million young people lack basic literary skills, and 60% of that 103 million are girls. As chair of the Commission on the Status of Women, I am constantly reminded that more girls are denied a right to education than boys. Today, there are 130 million girls out of school. Now, just to put that in context, if you put that all together, that's the same as the population of France and South Africa combined. It's the same as putting 6 times the population of my country and the population of Ethiopia together. They are girls who are without education. We know firsthand that investing in girls means sustainability for a society and an economy. Put simply, it means hope for the future. We're going to hear later today here in the programme from the private sector. I wanted just to mention to you the recent findings of the World Bank, which estimates that if all girls are to complete secondary education, this would actually give a lift to the global economy of an astounding $30 trillion. However, as it stands, the stark reality is that 1 billion girls and young women don't have the skills to engage in the current international economy. We know that we have to look beyond mere economic terms as well and look at our societies. And right now, the Executive Board, as we're in this hall just above us somewhere, the Executive Board of UNDP, UNFPA and UNOPS is meeting, and I'm working there as a new Vice President of the board. And this week in our discussions we've had some rather stark realities to take into account. However, we know that in increasing educational achievement, we heard this from UNFPA this week, educational achievement amongst girls can bring lower rates of HIV infection, delayed childbearing age, and safer births. Today, as we meet on the first International Day of Education, 800 women will die in childbirth. That's 2 aeroplanes full of women who will die today while we're in this room. Education is a key defence. It's a defence against the spread of HIV. It's also an enabler in terms of preventing early childhood marriage and also early childbirth. Put simply, keeping girls in school makes the world a safer place for girls and boys, and it makes the world a better place for all of us. In Ireland, we're convinced that we need to do a lot more to ensure that the children of those girls who are in vulnerable, fragile contexts have a right to education. 75 million young people are now living in fragile states across the globe, and they need educational support. Half of all primary school-aged school-aged children are out of school around the world. That's an extraordinary statistic. Half of all children. They also live in conflict areas. We applaud and continue to support UNICEF and UNHCR, as well as the Malala Fund, in championing the right to education in emergencies. Here's the thing, we all know that emergencies are now not just more frequent, but are more protracted. In fact, protracted is almost the norm. So doing something to ensure the continuity of education in crisis becomes a top-level humanitarian priority for my country. We believe we must collectively work to ensure the right to education is upheld, even in the most difficult circumstance. In Ireland, we have seen in times of conflict on our own island how commitment to education helped us talk our way to peace. We want to ensure that others have a chance to do that too. We're also working in post-conflict situations where, looking to the future, we want to ensure that we don't lose generations to crisis. Children of fragile states can become peace builders and peacemakers of those states. And Kofi Annan himself said education, quite simply, is peace building by another name. So as we come to the end of introductory remarks, I just wanted to say that on this International Day of Education, the extraordinary role that education plays in our communities and societies is really at the heart of the enthusiasm of all of us who sit here today. I wanted to say how proud Ireland is to have worked on this historic resolution, supported Nigeria's inspirational leadership, and we want to celebrate the first day in full throttle. Today shouldn't be just a celebration, of course. We need to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, and we will increase our overall investment in education in Ireland. We plan to spend at least €250 million in the next 5 years. Children around the world dream. They usually dream of what they'll do when they grow up, becoming a teacher, a doctor, an engineer, an app developer, an entrepreneur. The very brave ones think they might become diplomats. It's the children I think of when I read the words of W.B. Yeats, and I quote him, "I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams." We need to move forward with purpose, tread with purpose. It's our shared responsibility to ensure that what we see as a basic human right to education is upheld, so that those people that we think of around the globe, those young people, challenged girls, can achieve their dreams. I want to thank you, and I now plan to offer the floor immediately to Ambassador Tajani. Oh, Minister, excuse me, I'm offering the floor to Minister of Norway. Excuse me, Minister.
That's fine. Thank you so much. Dear friends, quality education can be transformative. It can change the lives of individuals, of families, and it can also transform societies. And this is the big promise of education that we celebrate here today on the first International Day of Education. We would really like to commend Nigeria and other champions for spearheading the establishment of a universal and united day for education. Yet we do know that the state of progress towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal 4 on education does not give us too much of a cause for celebrating. Some 750 million adults are illiterate, 262 million children are out of school, and nearly 60% of children and adolescents cannot read nor master basic numeracy. If we are to reach SDG 4 by 2030, continued and renewed investment in education is needed. To break the barriers to girls' education, we need to provide a safe learning environment and ensure that girls, as well as boys, are well nourished and healthy, and thereby able to learn. And this points to the big complexity of the task that we have before us. Norway will maintain a committed partner for international education, and we are even strengthening our efforts when it comes to achieving quality education for all. Since 2013, we have more than doubled our spending internationally on education, and from 2018 to 2019, we are increasing our support further by another 22 million US dollars. We are extremely thankful to our partners, such as UNICEF, UNESCO, and the Global Partnership for Education, for working tirelessly together with us to achieve our common goal of quality education for all. Indeed, partnership and collaboration lies at the heart of the 2030 agenda, and it's a prerequisite for actually achieving these goals. International entities, civil society, governments, and the private sector need to work together to achieve national, regional, and global progress. Reaching the SDG on education requires not only increased efforts, but also more targeted action to include marginalized people and ensure that no one is left behind. Norway strongly supports and facilitates collaboration between civil society organizations, research institutions, private sector actors to drive innovation in technology and digitalization. To use a very specific, timid, and important example, the Edu app for Syria, where Syrian refugee children are given access to a digital library, and in effect it's a very effective literacy learning game. That it has been created through a private sector competition. It's free to use, adapt, distribute, and I think it's a very strong example of the power of partnerships. Another example of a digital public good that can contribute towards better learning outcomes is the Global Digital Library. By 2020, the Global Digital Library will offer graded reading material on an open license in 100 languages. So private sector partnerships are not just needed to drive innovation. The private sector is crucial to development and the expansion of the digital infrastructure itself. Electricity and internet access are necessary for schools to really harness the potential in digitalization for improved education. And currently, only around 1 in 3 schools in sub-Saharan Africa has access to electricity. This has to change, and I think it illustrates quite well why quality education for all is about much more and a much broader engagement also when it comes to electricity, digitalization, and nutrition. So it's a big challenge ahead. That's why I really welcome the strong interest of the people here today. I think we are the crowd here are of course very mindful of these issues. We when we have this day and can market and push it wider on the international agenda and spread our message wider, we have a chance to increase our impact and ensuring that no one is left behind, and that people everywhere can benefit from quality education requires a really concentrated and concerted effort, and this day is a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Minister, reminding us we're in the 21st century and that there are tools that we can use, very importantly, but an enthusiastic message that the effort is needed. So now I'm going to hand the floor to my dear colleague, a teacher to his fingertips, His Excellency Professor Tijani Muhammad Bandi. You have the floor, the Permanent Representative of Nigeria, the leader of this initiative.
Thank you very much, madam. The distinguished moderator and my dear sister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me at the outset express gratitude to His Excellency, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Norway, for his presence at this maiden celebration of the International Day of Education. I want to thank Her Excellency Mary Ravenson, the former President of Ireland, as well as His Eminence Pope Francis, both of whom joined us via teleconferences in support of this initiative. My appreciation also goes to the distinguished permanent representatives of Ireland, Qatar, Singapore, and Norway, and to UNESCO for the collaboration in putting this event together. Education has long been recognized as a key enabler to development, unleashing, as it does, myriads of potentials of the human mind. Education is the key to development and growth in the arts, the sciences, and technology. From the phenomenal advances in health, agriculture, to public administration and private sector growth, and indeed, in every facet of life, education plays a pivotal role. Many studies have shown a positive relationship between educational attainment and economic development. Given the foregoing, any denial or impairment of education to an individual, a community, a nation, is necessarily a major harm inflicted on that entity. The battle cry of the United Nations then for education for all was well placed. It drew attention to the fact that there were vast differences in educational provision, attainment, and outcomes among regions and countries and within them. These have huge implications. While the world has made progress towards a more accessible and inclusive education since the turn of the millennium, much work remains to be done in ensuring that education reaches those that are farthest behind. Madam Moderator, many people in the developing world are still facing significant barriers to qualitative education. The adoption last December of the landmark resolution declaring today as International Day of Education has thus provided an opportunity to explore more innovative ways of increasing the reach of education and enhancing the current partnership that would make education more accessible to especially those in vulnerable situations. This is even more so as the guiding principle of Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development enjoins us to leave no one behind. Madam Moderator, let us use this maiden celebration of the International Day of Education to recommit not only to improvement in education outcomes at the national and global levels, but also to forge in partnerships for same. As the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos has rightly observed, educational gaps in the developing world need to be reduced if economic mobility is to be sustained, is to be sustainably ensured. In addition, for future generations and the world economy to benefit, there needs to be better alignment between schools and the world of work. Therefore, linking education with skills acquisition is a potent way of addressing the challenges of educational mobility and unemployment. As these are to be understood, all these are to be understood also within the context of education that humanizes and speaks to our most cherished values of tolerance, empathy, and solidarity. Over the last 3 decades, Nigeria has placed premium on the expansion and enhancement of educational opportunities in the country. It has launched and is executing the Universal Basic Education Program, thereby guaranteeing a 9-year basic education aimed at eradicating illiteracy, ignorance, and poverty, while accelerating national development and integration. The UBE focuses on ensuring uninterrupted access to free and compulsory 6-year primary and 3-year junior secondary education for every child in Nigeria, regardless of nationality. Nigeria has also established the Tertiary Education Trust Fund to bridge shortfalls in educational funding by government and better cater for the instructional, academic staff training and research development in our tertiary institutions. In addition, it has continued to give needed priority for girl child education, among several other initiatives. As a country that spearheaded the introduction and adoption of this International General Assembly's resolution that landmarked today as International Day of Education, Nigeria will continue to use the occasion to advocate for more qualitative, inclusive, and accessible education for all residents in Nigeria and beyond. We would also continue to leverage partnerships that would help bridge the gap in educational opportunities for many in the developing world, especially women and girls and people with disabilities. Nigeria has long been known to provide critical educational support to countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, ACP, through, among other means, the Technical Aid Corps, called TAC, which has been sending and paying teachers and other professionals to ACP countries for over 3 decades, thereby deepening South-South cooperation. Lastly, Madam Moderator, as we celebrate the maiden edition of the International Day of Education, I'm confident that we have kick-started another important event in the history of education that would invite the entire global community to a unanimity of purpose to leverage political commitment and raise awareness about the importance of investing in education and skills development for children and young people in line with 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Facilitate a discussion on the potential of innovation and emerging technologies to support better learning outcomes for the children and youth, especially the most marginalized. Raise awareness about steps needed to further foster inclusion and empowerment through education. And finally, further draw attention to the need for functional, practical partnerships in providing education, especially for those who have been previously marginalized throughout the world. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed, dear Brother Tijani, reminding us of what you call the battle cry of the UN of education for all, very importantly. And I hope that we can leave here today living up to your injunction that we're kick-starting with unanimity of purpose, a new phase of our commitment to education today. Thank you. So we're now going to hear from another great friend of ours who supported all of the work in the lead up to this important day here today, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Singapore to the United Nations, Ms. Josie Tang. So, Jofi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Your Excellency, Deputy Foreign Minister of Norway, Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues. Singapore is honoured to participate in this inaugural celebration of the International Day for Education. And we would first of all like to commend Nigeria for this initiative to highlight the importance of inclusive, equitable and quality education and its fundamental role in supporting the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Education, skills development and technology have been integral in Singapore's development story. And so I would like to use this opportunity to briefly share 3 points about our experiences and approach to education. First, Singapore believes that the wealth of a nation lies in its people, and our country's future growth and development depend on the continuous renewal and regeneration of our people. And I say this because, especially for Singapore as a small city-state where our only natural resource is human capital, quality education for all therefore is a priority that we place the utmost importance on and invest heavily in. The Singapore education system aims to provide each child with a solid foundation upon which to build their knowledge and skills and to equip them with the best possible tools to succeed in life. Education, including preschool education, is made accessible and affordable to every child, and importantly, this is regardless of race, gender, religion, or the income level of their parents. We believe that education plays a critical role as a social leveler. and that it ensures that people have access to opportunities and contribute to building sustainable and resilient societies. In the 21st century, we recognize the importance of developing citizens who will be competitive in the digital economy and global in their outlook. So our education system, a particular point of our education system emphasizes lifelong learning and developing soft skills that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And just to cite two examples to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. The Character and Citizen Education Scheme teaches values and cross-cultural skills in schools so that children learn global awareness and civic literacy. And our Skills Future Scheme is a national movement that promotes industry support for Singaporeans to upgrade their skills in order to continue progressing throughout their working lives. We believe that these types of initiatives are crucial to fostering empowerment through education and building peaceful and inclusive societies that can adapt to technological disruptions. So Singapore was therefore pleased to join 57 other member states to co-sponsor the resolution on this International Day of Education, spearheaded by Nigeria. We believe that that resolution and today's inaugural event are essential first steps to raising global awareness about the significance of education and the transformative impact it can have on societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jovi, for your work and also for reminding us about that soft skills and skills for the future part, very important messages. So I'm now also delighted to have at the table another great friend, Ms. Alanud Al-Tamimi of the Permanent Mission of Qatar. Qatar has been a leading advocate on education, and we were delighted to sit alongside you preparing this in November. You have the floor now, Ms. Al-Tamimi.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, we're very delighted and happy to see His Excellency Deputy Foreign Minister of Norway with us today, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We are very pleased to and honored to co-host this very International Day of Education with the Permanent Mission of Nigeria. So we thank them so much for their leadership in that regard, alongside also with Ireland, Norway, Singapore, to the United Nations and the UNESCO. The global observance of the United Nations International Day of Education provides a key opportunities to raise awareness on the key role of equality and relevant education for peace and sustainable development. In so many conflict-ridden places across the planet, millions of boys and girls and young people have little or no access to quality learning opportunities. These are the years where they should be safely spending in schools. Instead, of generation is being denied from their rights to achieve their full potential and may remain trapped in poverty, exclusion, discrimination, and conflict. Education is very critical for advancing the human development agenda and necessary for fostering peace, tolerance, and more prosperous world. To build a bright future, investing in girls and boys is the wisest thing we can do. Countries with equally educated girls and boys, women and men, are more likely to enjoy vibrant economics, political stability, and respect to human rights. Qatar has long prioritized education, both at home and abroad, and this emphasis is reflected in our international development assistance programs. Our efforts have supported numerous global and regional initiatives. On 18 March 2019, we will celebrate 10th years of the General Assembly held a historic thematic dialogue to access to education in emergencies, post-crisis, and transition situations caused by man-made conflict or natural disasters. A year later, on 9th July 2010, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the groundbreaking resolutions on the right of education in emergencies. Qatar Educate a Child initiative recently succeeded in helping 10 million of the most marginalized out-of-school children to receive quality primary education. This is an extraordinary initiative where we have 82 partnerships across 50 countries are participating. It has leveraged $1.8 billion in investment, and a third of which was contributed by the government of the state of Qatar. Qatar also deeply committed for the promoting education for justice in order to foster socially responsible global citizens and to inspire youth worldwide to uphold the rule of law. These are also the outcomes of the Doha Declaration on the crime prevention and criminal justice. Therefore, we have supported UNODC to establish a global program to implement the declaration, on which education for justice is a key component. An interesting example of this incredible work of the Education for Justice initiative is undertaking with regards to youth and the rule of law. Our hackathons, where it consists of events organized to challenge youth at the secondary and university level to develop technological solutions for social issues linked to crime, justice, and rule of law. In today's age of rapid technology change, Qatar is deeply committed to promoting lifelong learning opportunities and to provide avenues for advancement of young people. Going forward, our efforts will require investment, intent, and deep commitment for all of us. And we must work effectively in partnership with the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community as a whole. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Anu, reminding us of the risk, as you put it, of generations being denied by poverty and conflict, and what education can do by way of bringing it forward, and what you're doing in Qatar, so thank you. It's now my privilege to introduce to you our next speaker, Archbishop Bernardito Auza, the permanent observer of the Holy Cross of the Holy See, to the United Nations. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Madam Moderator, Your Excellencies, dear friends, I am indeed very happy to represent the Holy See today at this inaugural celebration of the International Day of Education. Prior to the adoption of Resolution 7325 on December 3 last year, there were 158 different international days observed by the United Nations. While some deal with education, like the International Literacy Day on September 8th and the World Teachers' Day on October 5th, it is fitting to have a day dedicated to the work of education as a whole, as a good in and of itself, as well as a crucial element in integral development and the building and maintenance of peace and security. When Pope Francis addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations in September 2015, speaking immediately before the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, he spoke 3 times about the importance of education and stressed that this means education for all. To enable men and women to escape from extreme poverty, he said, we must allow and assist them to be dignified agents of their own destiny. In UN parlance, it means education is a fundamental enabler and key to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. That is why the international community, in adopting the 2030 Agenda, committed itself resolutely in SDG 4 to ensure that by 2030, all girls and boys have access to early childhood development, care and primary education, to free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, and to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education. These commitments flowed from the fact that there are still 120 million children in the world who have no access to primary or secondary schooling, and another 130 million who go to schools that are of such poor quality that they don't acquire even the basics of literacy or numeracy. Resolution 7325 extended an explicit invitation for faith-based organizations to observe today in an appropriate way. The Catholic Church is very proud that over the course of its 2,000-year history, it has played a major role in the rise of schools and universities across centuries and in so many other places in the world. And I am very grateful to Her Excellency Mary Robinson and to Her Excellency Geraldine Byrne-Nason, our moderator, for paying homage to the Irish missionaries whose contribution to education in so many parts of the world, especially in very deprived areas, has really been great. One of the greatest fruits of the Irish contribution to education was Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who went to India and teach at the School for Girls St. Mary's with the Irish missionaries. Today, the Catholic Church owns and runs approximately 220,000 schools in primary, kindergarten, and secondary schools, and dozens of thousands of tertiary and university schools, and educating almost 70 million children and young people. More than half of these students are girls, and only a small portion of those are actually Catholics. This means that we really value education, not just for our own sake, for those who are of our religion, of our belief, but also really for all, to try to provide quality education for all. How about access is not enough? For children to grow into flourishing adults, much more is needed. Education is far more than instruction. Education comes from a Latin word, actually words. That's educare and educere. Educere indicates leading people out of darkness, leading one out of darkness into the light. In the concept, in the context of education, it means leading people out of darkness of ignorance into the light of knowledge, from immaturity to true maturity. Education's aim is not just helping people become smarter, but wiser and genuinely good persons. It involves not just imparting information, but formation. That's the way that integral education leads to integral development and peaceful and sustainable societies. Ladies and gentlemen, today we justly celebrate that integral education and give it the spotlight it justly deserves. The Holy See thanks all the organizers of this conference because it is convinced that this will contribute to a greater awareness of how important education is for all. Thank you for your invitation to join in today's festivities.
Thank you indeed, Archbishop, and a poetic way of recalling the words of Pope Francis speaking about the role of education in ensuring that young people become the dignified agents of their own destiny. I think that is an injunction that will stay with us. So thank you again, and now it's my honour to say that it's always a privilege, of course, to work with UNESCO. We are proud supporters of the Global Education Monitoring Report, and I want to particularly applaud the work that you do on lifelong learning, really sterling work. So we're thrilled to have Stefania Giannini, the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. And Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Excellencies, it's a great honor for me to be here today at the United Nations for the first ever International Education Day. And let me first of all express deep appreciation to Nigeria for leading on this historical resolution and to all member states that supported this adoption. This reflects a quite new determination to prioritize education, to put it at the very core agenda of the very core position of the political agenda all over the world, as the most powerful force to end poverty, drive inclusive and green growth, strengthen peace and democracy, and protect the planet. All of previous speakers have already emphasized these points. But this comes also at a very decisive time when millions of children still, and also youth and adults, are missing out on education. Girls and women face the highest deprivation. Today we also heard, let me say, a very important message from His Holiness Pope Francis, who evoked the universal dimensions of access, inclusion, and cultivating open mindsets and freedom of thought, which is closely related to human dignity and the sense of being human beings. And this goes straight on to the substance of our responsibility. In a very complex, unpredictable world, higher levels of education are more and more than ever required to navigate, to find the right way, to distinguish between truth and fake, to have a personal, critical thinking about everything. And also to face big challenges which are still around. We know, all of us know what I'm talking about: the environment, migration, increasing inequalities. Technology, which is a solution, maybe the great solution, but which is still part of the problem if we will not face new, very, very relevant topics like artificial intelligence and the integration of these topics in an education system like it must be. And multilateralism is more and more challenging when reinforced cooperation, international collaboration seems to be the only answer, as a paradox, I should say. But the 2030 agenda was adopted after intense negotiation, as other speakers already reminded all of us, with the conviction that it was achievable, the conviction that we can do that, we can get it. But that means cooperation, that means working together, that means strong partnership. UNESCO, entrusted with the coordination of the educational goal, led the setting up of the architecture to take it forward. We established the SDG Education 2030 Steering Committee. We organized in all regions consultations in order to disseminate a culture, a better understanding of the goal, to translate it into policies, and to share best practices. During the first global education meeting last December in Brussels, we also took stock, together with more than 40 ministers from all the regions of the world, and identify 8 priority areas that require increased attention to unlock progress. That's what we must do. It's not a simply celebrating day, let me say, frankly speaking. It's a question of a kickoff of a new roadmap in these 12 years left that we have in front of us from now to 2030. They are about inclusion across the board, supporting teachers, filling the gender gap, rethinking and promoting literacy, and meeting the demand of new skills, including digital skills. They also encompass education for global citizenship and sustainable development. But they also make a special reference to migration and emergencies, which is really an issue. We are cooperating a lot with our partners about it, building on our flagship 2019 about this topic, migration and education, and the 2 global compacts adopted here in December. Finally, the call for increased investment at all levels: domestic spending, aid, and new sources of financing. Definitely, to conclude, Your Excellencies, all of us know that this kind of investment can bring high returns for people, individuals, and societies. All of us know that this message must be pushed by all constituencies in this decisive year for education, as it comes up for review at the UN high-level profile meeting in July here in New York. Madam Chair said before that children usually have dreams. Let me say that policymakers, global leaders must have aspirations. We aspire for heads of state at the next UN General Assembly to highlight their commitment clearly, in one voice, clear voice, to education. We aspire for education and skills to be recognized by the G7 and G20 in the agendas of regional organization. And we have to sustain a global, great, big advocacy, a broad one, to push for education in society at large. UNESCO stands committed to cooperate with all our partners about it. And let me say that cooperation is a key word in our vocabulary to better compete against ignorance, intolerance, and really to better successfully build peace in men's and women's mind. Thanks to all of you for your strong commitment.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie, reminding us it's not just a celebration, but it's really time to roll up our sleeves and get on with doing the work that we all committed to, as you reminded us, in a multilateral cooperative way under SDG 4. Now I'm delighted to be offering the floor to our final speaker this morning. Ardent supporters, as we all are, of the extraordinary work that UNICEF does. It's now a real privilege to introduce the final speaker, Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, Omar Abdi. Omar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency, for the kind introduction. I want to join others by thanking the organizers of this event, the permanent missions of Nigeria, Ireland, Singapore, Qatar, and Norway. And congratulations to all our partners across the international community today as we celebrate the very first International Day of Education. As of today, we have less than 4,000 days, 3,995 in fact, to make good on our progress of achieving inclusive and quality education for all. We all agree that every child deserves a fair chance to learn, but there is a wide gulf between setting a goal and achieving it, especially when the barriers standing between children and education are so high and so many. Poverty, inequalities, disease outbreaks, lack of access and quality, conflict, disasters, and persistent discriminations based on disability, ethnicity, religion, or gender. Bringing the promise of SDG 4 to life means targeting specifically those children farthest behind. It means tailoring our interventions to meet their education needs. It means investing in what we know works. And always it means keeping learning at the center of our efforts. A good example is our work on girls' education. 10% of primary-aged girls are out of school. Many more are not able to progress to secondary school because they lack basic skills in reading and math. Some face social and cultural barriers. Many are forced into early marriage, or their schools lack separate toilets for girls. Failure by failure, the cost is high to girls and to their societies. Better educated women tend to be healthier. They participate more in the job market and earn higher incomes. They have fewer children and marry at a later stage. And if they do become mothers, their children are healthier and better educated. In other words, educated girls can help lift households, communities, and entire nations out of poverty, which is why UNICEF is working with generous partners like Norway, European Commission, Qatar, and many others to invest in proven interventions that can improve both access to and the quality of education for girls. In Somalia, UNICEF and GPE have supported an 18-month diploma in education management and leadership targeting female teachers. When we increase the number of trained female teachers, we not only provide young people with better education, we change attitudes about girls' learning, and we give girls a role model to follow as they continue their education. In Afghanistan, UNICEF helped enroll over 162,000 girls in community-based schools last year. These schools are a much safer option for girls and help communities get more involved in educating their girls. And in northeast and northwest Nigeria, where more than half of primary school-aged girls are not in school, UNICEF is working with the government of Nigeria to support the Girls' Education Project with funding from DFID. The project is piloting a series of interventions in primary schools, including early learning interventions, to improve the skills of children in primary grades in their mother tongue. So far, the project has reached nearly 750,000 girls, or 75% of the target of 1 million girls. As we improve access and learning for girls, we must also address their needs after school ends. Over 1 billion young people, including 600 million adolescent girls, will enter the workforce in the next decade, a workforce that has been transformed by technology, innovation, and automation, where yesterday's skills don't always match today's job market. That's why UNICEF is gathering public and private sector partners around Generation Unlimited, a new platform to identify and scale up solutions to improve education and skills training for today's young people. From high-tech distance learning to apprenticeships to job shadowing programs to mentorships. We are building new solutions that can prepare young people, especially girls, for the world of work they are about to enter. Getting girls into school, keeping them there, and supporting their efforts to find employment and shape a better future for themselves and their societies. Across all of this work, UNICEF needs the continued support, ideas, and commitment of partners like those here today. By working together, we can make the next 4,000 days true days of progress for girls and young women. As we prepare to mark the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child this year, let's keep pushing to translate the right to education and the promise of SDG 4 into a daily reality for every child and every girl and every boy everywhere. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much indeed, Omar. I don't think we could have put it better ourselves, translating our promises into reality and keeping learning at the centre. So music to our ears right across the panel here. I'm now at the point where I want to ask you to thank every single speaker at the table this morning. I think we've heard, as my brother Tijani says, the battle cry, but we wouldn't have heard it, frankly, if the Nigerian mission, led by the great teacher here on my left, hadn't taken the initiative. So I think I'd like to give a warm round of applause to Ambassador Tijani. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to, this panel is going to move. My colleague, Ambassador Brian Flynn, will take over the managing of the moderatorship now. But as we move off the panel, thank you, Minister. Thank you, colleagues. You're going to have yet another video to entertain you while we slip stage right and stage left.
Thank you, moderator.
You're very welcome. And I hope you enjoy the rest. And you will also have that wonderful performance to look forward to from our young harpist and singer later. So thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Do you think the world is going to be a better place next year, in the next decade? Can we end hunger, achieve gender equality, halt climate change, all in the next 15 years? Well, according to the governments of the world, yes, we can. In the last few days, the leaders of the world meeting at the
Dear colleagues and friends, we might try and take our seats.
Trying to find space here.
Yes, it's not easy.
I will send you
Dear friends and colleagues, could I ask you to take your seats? Thank you all very much. As you can see, we've a very busy schedule for the next two panels, so we might try and get started. We're going to start with the first multi-stakeholder panel, and this panel is focused on perspectives from the world of academia. So we have a very good panel, and we'll get started with our first speaker, Professor Fernando Reimers, Director of Harvard University's International Education Policy Program, which supports the development of leaders of systematic efforts to enhance the quality of education around the world, in line with SDG Goal 4. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador Flynn. I want to recognize the very good leadership of Education Director of UNESCO, Stefania Giannini, and of the governments of Ireland, Norway, Nigeria, Qatar, Singapore, and the representative of the Holy See for this important convening to bring us together to think about how to address through education some of the most significant challenges of our time, some of the crises of our time. In every crisis, there is an opportunity. 400 years ago, a man who experienced 30 years of religious persecution, 30 years of war, Jan Comenius, had the wisdom to look back at the violence he had experienced and to say, we should educate every person so we should have peace in the world. And that idea of Jan Comenius began a global movement that transformed humanity for the better. 70 years ago, in the middle of World War II, at a conference in Washington, D.C. in 1944, a number of leaders asked themselves, how do we create the conditions so we can have global peace and security? And a year later, in San Francisco, with the war still ongoing, at a conference, the UN was chartered. And the inclusion of the right to education in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights changed the world for the better, because 7 decades ago, the vast majority of the world's children did not have the opportunity to set foot in a school. Only 1 in 2 children of school age went to school. Today, more than 90% do, and the world population has increased from 2.5 billion then to 7.5 billion then. This is the most remarkable silent revolution that humanity experienced, because ordinary people, people like you and me, made it their business to read the signs of the time and to address them. There are real crises in the world. Crises caused by poverty and exclusion, by climate change, by violence. As we meet this morning, hundreds of thousands of peaceful demonstrators march all over Venezuela, supporting the democratically elected leader Juan Guaidó and counting on international assistance of all means necessary to prevent the bloodbath that the government and the military are prepared to inflict on those people who are asking for a return to democracy. The UN Sustainable Development Goals represent the most hopeful vision of what it would take to build a world in peace that includes everyone and where we can live in ways which are sustainable with the environment. But we will not achieve those goals without education, without making them absolutely central and cornerstone of the project of educating all children. And in this task, universities have a key role to play in 3 ways: developing instructional content and high-quality curriculum, providing support to teachers, and educating the leaders who can support teachers in their work, advancing that. Let me share some examples. With my graduate students at Harvard, I have developed a comprehensive K-12 curriculum, absolutely aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is taught in thousands of schools around the world. This book, which I have made free in honor of this occasion on Kindle, Empowering Global Citizens and Empowering Students to Improve the World in 60 Lessons, is, I hope, a resource to advance this movement that Stefania Giannini has convened us to achieve. Supporting teachers. We are not going to achieve these goals if we don't ensure that in every classroom there is a well-prepared, qualified, well-supported teachers, and in this task, universities are an indispensable partner. Lastly, educating leaders. The International Education Policy Program, which Ambassador Flynn mentioned, which I have the honor to direct, and I'm delighted to see many graduates of that program and students of that program here, is an example of one of the ways in which universities can provide the people who take responsibility to lead educational institutions, to provide support to schools. Tomorrow and the day after, a book that examines the role of leadership titled Leading the Global Education Movement will also be released for free on the internet for all of you to see. So I am delighted by the opportunity to bring us together. These are the best of times. These are the worst of times. The world has never been better in objective ways for most people, but we also have in front of us crises that can be addressed and should be addressed if we all understand that it is time not for business as usual, but to get out of our silos, to get out of our routines, and to collaborate across institutions in standing on the shoulders of those giants who began the global education movement, beginning with Comenius, beginning with those who included education as a human right, and make sure that every classroom is indeed a place that empowers every student in the world to be an architect of their own lives and a contributing member of the many communities of which they are a part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, and I think you brought out very well the connection between peace and education, and that's something very important in this building, and also the positive impact of broadening education's reach, which again, if we're to meet the goals we've all set for ourselves, is very important. Also, I suppose on a day we're marking education and thinking of some of the challenges young people face, I think it's appropriate that we heard some words from Mr. Dickens as well. So I'll pass on now to Professor Dilson Rassier, Dean of Faculty of Education in McGill University in Montreal.
Thank you very much. And thank you. I would like also to thank you the missions who supported this important initiative, and our view who came to debate with us education and how we can improve. The fourth sustainable goal from UN is very clear, and it's never too much to repeat. We have to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities to all. In other words, simplifying this long goal, we want a world that's 100% educated. All children in the world should be educated with quality education. And that would have no distinctions, people with different economic status, race, gender, beliefs, or any other factor that may divide us. We must ensure that by 2030, every single girl and boy is educated. This is obviously a noble goal, but what we, I think, have to do is to think how we do that. How we actually go from academia, how we go from words to real life, how we make that happen. Of course, there are several structural layers that we need to work with, from governments to citizens, from where it stands at the UN to schools around the world. And everybody needs to make its part. At McGill University, just to give an example, we are engaged in this task very deeply. We're trying to work collaborative with communities and schools. And the first step that we took, and I'm sure that it may sound obvious, but it's very important to us, is we're trying to open the academia, we're trying to open the university to the world. We're trying to actually break silos between academic knowledge, between academia and those communities that need the most. In the fact of education specifically, we are actually using the knowledge that we have with our professors, with years and years of research, to actually work together very closely with schools in underprivileged areas in Quebec, with professors, with teachers, with administrators, with the goal, very objective goal, to decrease dropout rates that are actually staggering high in public school systems. So we are actually promoting the activities in our faculty that will be done in conjunction with the schools, instead of having our academics working only in academia. We have, for example, worked with indigenous communities in Quebec who has been marginalized for many years in the past, to actually create programs that will develop teachers, will prepare teachers in schools in their own communities, in their own languages, using some of the expertise that we acquired over 20 years of existence, but diplomas that are going to be recognized by the Ministerial, are recognized by McGill, and that can be used as if they came to McGill, as they came to downtown Montreal to actually learn how to be teachers. We have now two full-time programs for these professors in these communities, and it's working very well, because even the curriculum was constructed with them. So it's just small steps that we're taking. It's a way that we see academia actually positive influence in the world, and although these are small steps, we think they're very important. Unfortunately, like we heard before, we have millions of children, 250 million children and youth that don't go to school. We have almost 700 million children that do not read or cannot do math properly. So these children are having their rights violated, and this is absolutely unacceptable. As we know, education means much more than reading, math, learning scientific theories. Education is directly linked, and I would dare to say is one of the major tools for the achievement of other UN sustainable goals, such as eliminate poverty, gender equality, decent work, peace, justice, and having strong institutions. An educated child, an adult, is much less likely to be poor, less likely to make a distinction between human beings of different genders, colors of skins, cultures, and religious belief. An educated person will advocate for peace and justice, always whatever is needed, and will deeply appreciate cultural diversity. Investing in education takes a lot of effort, a lot of funding, a lot of resources. But we do invest in things that we have dear to us. We heard every day discoveries with chemicals that may cure rare diseases. We understand better how nanotechnology drives aspects of our lives. We see new scientific discoveries every day. But I believe, although this is essential, this has no value if you have one child around the world, one child that cannot read, that has its future already limited, and that can bring this child to poverty and not even be able to actually take advantage of all these amazing discoveries that you see every time. So education is precious. Education takes a lot of resources, but a world without education would be way worse than anything we can imagine. Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. We heard that, and I hope that we all work together to try to make those changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, and that focus you had on striving for quality education. Your points as well on the need for lifelong learning is really important, and continuous training, and particularly we see the pace of change in society today, and that need to be upskilling and learning really is something that goes on for all our lives. You're an interesting points as well on the opening up of access to education and breaking down barriers and some innovative ways of trying to do that, and overall that sense of ambition, and to paraphrase you, but maybe to quote from the SDGs, the need to leave no one behind. So thank you for your contribution. I'll now hand over to Evelyn de Jesus, who's a well-known advocate not only for education but for justice more broadly. You have the floor.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Evelyn de Jesus, and I'm Vice President of the United Federation of Teachers in New York City, and also a National Vice President for the American Federation of Teachers, and it's a trade union of 1.7 million professionals that champions fairness, democracy, economic opportunity, and high-quality public education, healthcare, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you all today, and let me start by saying how much us as educators welcome the United Nations decision to proclaim January 24th as International Day of Education. Historically, our educators have played a special role in strengthening our democratic culture, and they are urgently called on to do so once again. Quality public education has always been essential to a strong and vibrant democracy that stands up to bigotry and discrimination and protects the civil rights of all. It prepares students for productive lives, good citizenship, and achievement. When we lift our students, we lift our communities, and we move closer to meeting the UN's Sustainable Development Goals in many areas, including improved education, poverty reduction, gender equality, access to healthcare, and environmental protection. Quality public education is society's primary means to foster equity, opportunity, and pluralism. But these essential pillars are under attack around the world, where nationalism and narrow tribal interests are tearing at democratic governance. We would be wrong to assume that our previous successful democratic heritage automatically protects us from such threats. In fact, we must constantly be defending public education and our other great institutions because they cannot defend themselves. Right now, evidence from Education International surveys show that on current trends, the commitment to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all by 2030 will not be met. Did you hear me? Will not be met. Millions of new educators are needed to fill a widening teacher gap. Poor infrastructure and inadequate learning resources hinder our efforts, and governments must step up to meet international education financing benchmarks. At least 5% of countries' GDP, or at least 20% of the national budget to be allocated to education. Here in the US, as well as in many other countries, our systems of public education is under attack and often referred to as a commodity, rather than the public right that it is. Worldwide schools are being closed at an alarming rate, and entire districts are losing the battle to unregulated, for-profit privatization schemes. These threats to our public education system are threats to our democracy writ large. One of the biggest challenges remains how to make our education system and our schools truly inclusive, make our schools accessible, welcoming, and friendly to children of diverse backgrounds and the most marginalized, and that includes the migrants and refugees who come to our borders seeking our protection. It is tragic that our own country's policy of separation of children from their families at our southern borders migrants has denied education rights and health care to so many thousands of children. That is why we are standing in defense of these children through an official complaint about our government's policy of zero tolerance we filed with the United Nations Human Rights Council. At the American Federation of Teachers, our work in education has taught us about the benefits, the difficulties, and the ways forward for creating democratic public schools that prepare young people for engaged citizenship. And that is why the AFT will always support the drive for universal quality public education, a commitment to equity and access, family and communities engagement, and a strongly supported teaching force and paraprofessional staff. Thank you once again for the UN's welcome recognition of the important values of education through the creation of International Day of Education. I ask you and I challenge you, if the next generation is to defend democratic institutions, our students must learn how democracy works, how democracy is made sustainable, what democracy looks like. Who better to teach it than our educators standing on the front line, and where better to teach it than in our public schools? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for that emphasis on the role education plays in building and promoting democracy in our societies, and even in helping us understand democracy and why it's so important, and the role we can all play as citizens, and that we have a responsibility to play. Education is something we have to stand up for and defend, and particularly for those most vulnerable, as you said. It's a great pleasure to introduce now Yasmin Sharif from Education Cannot Wait, someone we know very well in the Irish Mission here in New York. Yasmin has served for many years in this area, working across humanitarian development, human rights, gender and peacekeeping issues. So you have the floor, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, my friend and colleagues, and thank you all. First of all, I would like to congratulate, of course, Nigeria and the 58 member states, Ireland being one of them, and Singapore and Qatar, and I don't want to forget anyone. Help me.
I'll give you a list.
Norway, of course, another of our close friends, and we have them all here. Yeah, I think I mentioned everyone. To take forward the resolution for the new International Day on Education, because it keeps serving as a reminder that we have not fulfilled our commitments and obligations. And you mentioned the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. And when we look back, we see that a lot has been done, but we have a long way to go until we achieve the beautiful commitments and promises made in the UN Charter. And one of them is the right to education. Now, I speak for children and young people in emergencies and protracted crisis. And in 2010, I was mentioned by my colleague, the ambassador from Qatar, we had the General Assembly resolution on education in emergencies. And looking back, almost a decade later, we are faced with the fact and the reality there are 75 million children and young people who today, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in the Rohingyas, in the camps in Bangladesh, on the Greek islands, and I was there just a few months ago and saw these children and young people living in cardboard boxes, squeezed on top of each other in the reception centers on the shores of Europe. When we look around, we will find at least, and that falls under the work that we are doing, at least 25 countries where children or refugee children and young people, adolescent, girls, above all 39 million of them, have not been able to access their inherent right, inalienable right, to quality and inclusive education, despite the promises made since 1945 and notably since the resolution in 2010. And today we honor the renewed efforts to keep drawing attention to education, and for us, education for those 75 million. Now, when we want to translate a vision into action, we have the vision, it's there, and we are working very hard together trying to materialize that vision. But the reality is that when we deal with emergency and crisis, we are dealing with additional challenges. We have already the fact that there is abject poverty around the globe, but in emergencies and crisis, and for refugees and internally displaced, there are an additional layer. And for girls, there's a triple layer. And for those who are suffering disabilities as a result of conflict or birth, or they have a quadruple layer. So we are speaking about an exceptional situation where it has gone beyond the regular challenge that we would normally face and have to cut through layers and barriers. Now, 1 out of 4 of the world's school-age children and youth who are living in crisis of conflict are affected. They do not access education. And in terms of the financing that goes on into education, between 2 to 4%. So when we have a humanitarian disaster, we have an earthquake in Indonesia, we have a refugee flow from Myanmar or from Syria or from Yemen, normally 2 to 4% of all the resources that are allocated will go to education. And education is so much more than the math and the literacy skills. It is psychosocial services, creative learning to overcome trauma, is to get a safe learning environment. All of them badly need it, and still we only allocate 2 to 4% for their continued access to some resemblance of education. The funding gap to reach the 75 million children, if we're going to do that by 2030, is 8.5 billion in an annual funding gap. It's 8.5 billion in an annual funding gap. And for education cannot wait, we have set a target that if we can reach 1.8 billion by 2021, we will be able to reach 9 million girls and boys, equally 50-50. Now, to conclude, how do we do this, and how do we take a vision so beautifully described in the Charter, in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, in the EIE, Education in Emergency General Assembly Resolution, and in the resolution on the International Day of Education? How do we translate it into reality in a crisis? Well, first, we have to do something that everyone says in this building, and is saying it more and more open today with our new Secretary General. The World Bank is saying the same. The EU is saying the same. We need less bureaucracy and more accountability. Less process and more people. And focus unbendingly on and impatiently on results on the ground. And results that are sustainable. Not small filling boxes and extinguishing fires, but actually making a difference. And that's why education cannot wait. Works together with the humanitarian community to be able to respond to the immediate needs when there is an influx, an outbreak of a disaster, and the development actors so that we can lay the building blocks for medium and long-term systemic changes and achieve actual learning outcomes through multi-year programs. And we work with partners like UNICEF, UNESCO, UNHCR, Save the Children. We are in discussions with Qatar on education above all, and many others. And we have 13 very strong donor partners in Scandinavian countries and many Europeans and the EU and many others and Canada who have come in and invested in education. Cannot wait, because it's the first time that we bring together the humanitarians and the development actors in a new way of working. We operate with speed, but we are searching for depth. So we say humanitarian speed with development depth. And depth means quality, and it means sustainability. So it's a new way of working, which also echoes the outcome of the World Humanitarian Summit and also the efforts of the UN reform today. And we look forward, of course, to more partners, governments, private sector, civil society, teacher associations, and many others. Today, we are in 19 crisis countries around the globe and have mobilized around $335 million and need to reach 1.8 by 2021. To conclude, I've been very inspired today to listen to everyone. And I hear words like education for justice or humanity and the need to open mindsets and the freedom of thought and education as a means of leading children and the youth out of darkness into the light. And from all my travels, and Education Cannot Wait is very field-driven and oriented. We travel a lot to the camps, to the disaster sites. And I see these young people, I see the young girls who are exposed to sexual violence and trafficking, the young orphan boys who have two options in life, to become productive or destructive, sitting in those cramped camps, having lost their families. And when I talk with them, and I see their thinking and their mindset, I see very resilient people, very strong people who have overcome enormous difficulties. But I also know if they don't access quality education, things will go very wrong for them. But if they access quality education, not only are we bringing light to them, they will one day, thanks to that quality education, enlighten all of us and all of humanity. And that kind of enlightenment era is exactly what we need today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin. And that the access to education in emergencies and crisis situations is one of the biggest challenges we face. And you painted that picture very vividly. The figure of 75 million is really striking, and when you think of the long-term implications of that. But as you say, now we need to be looking at focusing on results and actions and trying to address this, as I think was said in the earlier panel as well. We're a little tight on time, but we move on to our next panelist, Dr. Alan Goodman, President of the Institute of International Education, a not-for-profit organisation in the field of international educational exchange and development training. You have the floor.
It's an honor and an inspiration to sit on this panel, to be at this day and to hear this conference and to learn so many of the activities that are taking place on the front lines of trying to make international a part of everybody's education and make sure that education is lifelong learning in its content so that we can build peace today and build peace tomorrow. So thank you very much for having me. 2 years ago, with the support of the Catalyst Foundation for Universal Education, we created a platform for education in emergencies response. The idea was to find all of the universities and colleges that had scholarships and connect all of the displaced and refugee higher education students with those opportunities and give them virtual advising during the process. Last year, we had 25,000 displaced refugee and students try to connect with a scholarship and a university opportunity. And what was striking about that number to me is it's about the same number of colleges and universities in the tertiary sector that we have around the world. Imagine if everyone agreed to take one. We would have been able to help 25,000 displaced students. We would have been able to make a darn good start in preventing a lost generation. And that's the challenge for higher education today. Our job is to prevent that lost generation, and we've never had to do that before. When the world had as many refugees and displaced people right after World War II as we do now, the gross enrollment ratio for higher education, even in the advanced countries, was 3 to 5%. When the war broke out in Syria, it was 25%. We've never had to face the challenge in higher education of placing, connecting, reconnecting so many higher education students. We thought people lived in refugee camps for a few years. The average now is 17 and a half years. They're ready to go to university, but there is no place near the camp or in the country that can accommodate them. That's why everyone should take one. All of you here went to college. Ask your university, have you taken in a refugee or rescued a scholar? Because we're all going to need that as we confront how to deal with this challenge. The SDGs allowed us to stay on the sidelines. We opined, we measured, we created metrics, but it didn't ask us to do anything. I'm sorry, the Millennium Development Goals didn't ask us in higher ed to do anything. Goal 4 in the SDGs asks us to do something about education. One thing we can do is everyone can take in a refugee. And when you do that, you lift a whole family, a whole community. You lift not only one generation, but two. And what we're discovering in our work, whether it's in the camps or in the urban centers, is that when you connect a student to higher education, again, they thrive. And it doesn't matter how long they've been disconnected, because they become your best student, they become your highest achiever, they give back to the community, and they take care of the rest of their families. So it's a major new task for higher education. It's not easy, but it's not like curing cancer. We have the means to prevent the lost generation, and it is education, and it's taking care of the displaced and refugee students that we have today. To conclude, may I simply say that as you exit the building, you will look directly across the street at our world headquarters. It's a building we share with the mission of Qatar and also the mission of Saudi Arabia to the United Nations. And we all share the goal of helping prevent a lost generation. And I'd like to assure you that the 650 people that I work with, have the privilege of serving at IIE, are committed every day to making every day an International Education Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman, and those figures and that illustration you made of the ever-growing, unfortunately, number of displaced people and refugees who need access to education, who have a hunger for access to education. How do we address that? And indeed, you gave us all a very concrete way in which many of us could individually try to do something about it. But it's a really important issue, and pay tribute to the work your organisation does in this field. We have our final speaker now, Brandon Fleming, founder of the Harvard Diversity Project. You have the floor.
Thank you. Please permit me to first extend my fondest regards to the Permanent Mission of Nigeria and co-sponsors for pioneering such an auspicious occasion. This International Day of Education proceeds in the spirit of heroes throughout the annals of history who considered education to be among the human rights worth dying for, understanding that education at best could be a pipeline to prosperity, or the lack thereof, a pipeline to poverty. Many years ago, there was a young man who suffered from traumatic abuse that manifested in school as deviant behaviors. His teachers labeled these characteristics to be that of a delinquent, when they should have recognized it as a clarion cry for help. He was neglectfully passed along until found on the bed of suicide, disheveled, depressed, and deranged. His life was indeed spared, but his hope was in fact lost, until one day he was restored, and his life was forever changed by a teacher. Distinguished colleagues, I am that young man. This story is mine, and inherently the catalyst of the Harvard Diversity Project. I share this experience with you because I was not and am not the only one in need of redemption. Studies show that a child born into poverty has a 4% chance of being delivered from its cyclical grasp. And what is that child's crime? That they should be relegated to a life of struggle and suffering. When we observe the growing disparities that affect fragile, marginalized communities, and for those of us who have the moral sensibility to ask the question why, the answer is quite clear: access and equity. What is it that makes education so worth fighting for? It's what compels a man to drink hemlock for the sake of one's ability to question. It's what makes a man endure 27 years of imprisonment so that others can be free. It makes a young lady take a bullet to the head before giving up the right for young women to be learned. It's what makes a council of leaders and diplomats adopt a resolution to coalesce around the advancement of all people. Because every single one of us in this room understands the potential and power of education and its ability to transform one's mind, one's heart, and ultimately one's life. By promoting equitable education, we inevitably empower the human being to be self-sufficient. But we must first see equity as a collective responsibility, understanding that the most powerful thing you could ever do is stand up for a group that you don't belong to, be it another gender, another race, or another socioeconomic class. This is how we empower people, and this is how we foster inclusivity, by not just leading with the mind, but also leading with the heart. And in so many ways, the elements of nature can help us understand humanity. Analogously, our global community is just like a light. When you break it down to its most basic composition, it is a compilation of many colors. And without these colors, the light cannot shine at its brightest. But when each color is equally valued and equally represented, the effervescent light of humanity can shine through the unifying prism of peace. Because in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story. It's a story that really tells us the role a teacher can play in shaping someone's life. But for that to happen, we have to invest in teachers, we have to give them the resources, and we have to create the space where you can have that understanding. But thank you again for sharing that. Again, it's a lesson of what we can do individually, but also what we can do as societies. And that need to stand up for others, to stand up for groups of whom we're not a member. In some ways, it seems a more relevant message now than ever. So thank you for that again. We are a little over time, but I think we do have time to take some questions from the floor. I'd encourage, in particular, our younger members of our audience to if they have any questions. So, yeah, I see we've two there, the lady in black and the lady behind. So, yeah, thank you. If you press the mic, yeah.
Does it work? Great. Okay. In Canada, where I'm from, two of our westernmost provinces, Alberta and British Columbia, have recently introduced a new curriculum, a way of teaching in classrooms. It's called SOGI 123. It stands for sexual identity, or sexual orientation and gender identity. So it's a new way for teachers and educators to create a culture of inclusion for students in our provinces. So my question to the panel is what is the role of educators to create that culture of inclusivity, especially in places where there isn't that inclusivity.
Thank you. We might take just a couple together. So as this lady did, if you just say who you are and a short question. Thank you.
Good morning to all of us celebrating the Education Day here at the United Nations. I am Queen Mother, Dr. Deloise Blakely. I am the Community Mayor of Harlem and the Ambassador of Goodwill to Africa. We just returned last year from Senegal, co-host with France, the Global Education Conference, and where we, with Brianna, raised over $2 billion at that conference in Senegal. The question that I would ask all of the panelists, how do we see a bringing in from the poor and the powerless of inclusion, of educating all of our children? How do we propose to do that holistically? Can you please explain it to Queen Mother after being 50 years around this United Nations as a humanitarian who received $1 a year for each year? Please explain to Queen Mother.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I might just, if somebody from the panel wants to take maybe the first question on creating that culture of inclusivity, and if somebody else wants to touch on the second question. Any volunteers?
I'll give it a shot. So in New York City, we have curriculum on culturally responsiveness. We are training all our teachers. It's something that we've had it through legislation. We're having it actually nationally because teachers are coming from all over, and many of our teachers don't look like the kids that they're teaching. So to be culturally responsive means access and equity. Equity means gender identification, means demographics, means poverty. So what I would say to you in your provinces, there's always got to be a catalyst. There's always got to be a first person to step up and start it. For us, it works. We're doing it here, and we're changing the way our perceptions are of who the children are and who they're not. And we're getting training, and we're making sure that our teachers understand what that means and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and how also to always have a welcoming environment. Even though they may not understand what that means, as we train them, we also give a safe environment for them to know who they are and what is allowable to them. So what I would say to you is try it, and if you need any help, I'll give you my card, and maybe we can work together.
Yeah, I would actually comment on that as well. It seems, that the question is around inclusivity, and one of the things that I share with people is that it's binary. The responsibilities are binary in that you have a role from those who are excluding, and there's a role for those who are being excluded. And one of the things that I share with people is that, when it comes to inclusivity, we have a responsibility that in spaces that are not inclusive, sometimes we have to be intrusive. And what that simply means is that we have to build as we climb and see every opportunity of success as a platform to reach back and pull others up with us. And so we have a responsibility within our own respective communities to make sure that we provide equitable opportunities for the people that we want to serve.
There is a school in Athens that discovered that it was fairly near refugee camps, and the principal decided to take in one student. The students decided to take in 18 more. And that's how it works. And we have a terrific generation of student activists at the secondary and even primary level who get how important it is to do that, and schools that are opening their doors. And if you take one, you might end up taking a dozen. And that's the only way we're going to scale up, but it is real citizen and student action.
I'm going to try to address both questions at the same time, the question of inclusion and the question of educating the whole child. It's helpful to remember that education has at the same time the dual role of conserving what a society considers good and passing out to the next generation, but also equipping the next generation with the tools to make the world better. And so education is morally grounded. I think it's grounded in a commitment to universal human rights. And that means that at times that is going to place teachers at odds with the accepted values, the dominant values in the communities where they teach. It's very important to understand that in that context, teachers need to know they are not alone. That when teachers are advancing human rights, whether it is the rights in those provinces of children of different gender identifications to be who they are and to feel that they belong, to feel that they have a right to be who they are, or whether it is including educating the whole child, we cannot expect that teachers are going to do that as if they were superheroes. We need to make sure that there are networks of support within those schools and across schools so that teachers can have the skills, the courage, and the support to do the task of making sure that classrooms are spaces that anticipate a future that is better than the present. In our country, in the United States, there are teachers in schools in parts of this country that have very limited opportunities to access a curriculum, for example, that would help them teach in a way that is inclusive to children of different racial identities, of different religious identities. We have whole deserts in America, even though we have programs of professional development where teachers would do that against the wishes of those who speak most loudly in the community. And I think we need to take on the charge of creating that infrastructure that provides the teachers the support they need to make sure that education delivers the dual role that it has to not only pass on that which society considers good to the next generation, but to equip them to make the world better.
Maybe just Yasmin very briefly, because then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, no, but I think very importantly on inclusion and diversity, often it starts at home. And there is the importance of having a seamless transition from the parents who are responsible for instilling the foundational value system of embracing diversity, and then in cooperation and partnership with the teachers, and hopefully having teachers who can take over that responsibility. I myself remember growing up having values instilled very early, which drew me to the United Nations. But values were also taken over by my teacher in religion, faith-based, about the ideals and the principles of the UN and the respect of embracing all faiths, non-faiths, as long as we did good for others and humanity. And that is actually one value that is probably the most scarce today, because once young people can grasp that one and evolve into responsible citizens, this world will also loosen up on its current barriers and racism and prejudices and exclusion that is emerging. Finally, there is 77 trillion. A report presented to the World Humanitarian Summit calculated there is 77 trillion in grand total of gross global domestic GDP around the world today, 77 trillion. And if just a few percentages of that could be allocated to education across the globe, and with specific allocations to children and youth in armed conflict and crisis, we could achieve SDG 2030, and we could make that big action-oriented impact on the ground. So it's a lot about funding, reaching the right people. And when I say less bureaucracy and more accountability, less heavy structures sitting in faraway land, and be out there with the people, empower civil society, empower the teachers, empower the governments, but also empower the students and their families to be able to access quality and inclusive education. So shift our eyes and our focus away to the places where the action is needed, and that will also reduce cost, and it will also make us more motivated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin. I think just I'd add that in terms of making sure we have an inclusive global approach, a day like today isn't going to solve all the challenges we face, but it's an important step in making sure that we have that focus internationally on the importance of education and a way of reaffirming our common goal of meeting SDG 4 as well as the other SDGs. I'm really sorry, but we're out of time now because we want to leave some time for the next panel. but I know that the panelists here will be in the room, and I'm sure they'll be happy to speak to you on marge of the next panel. So we're going to play a couple of videos now. I'd ask you to remain in your seats, and we'll just switch over the panel, and we'll get started straight away on the next one.
Ambassador, Master
Dear Ministers, Ambassadors. Dear Ministers, Ambassadors, Delegates, and friends, I am sorry I cannot be with you today to mark the first International Day of Education. I am preparing to visit Sierra Leone to launch the latest Global Partnership for Education grant, which aims to support the government's plans to provide free, quality education for all children in Sierra Leone. I would like to commend Nigeria for their leadership and all member states for their support in establishing a global day to highlight the importance of education. This initiative confirms for me the growing realization that a quality education is central to ensuring that communities are healthy, safe, and prosperous. Going forward, my hope for International Day of Education is that it will inspire, inform, and engage partners from around the globe to ensure that we do deliver on the SDG promise of inclusive and equitable quality education for all. At GPE, we're all about partnership. We harness the collective strength of developing countries, donors, international organizations, civil society, teachers' organizations, the private sector, and foundations in order to dramatically increase the number of children who are in school and learning. Together, we can transform education outcomes for children everywhere. And that is not just a step to achieve SDG 4, but it will have lasting benefits across the entire Sustainable Development Agenda. I wish you every success with your discussions today, and I look forward to our continued partnership.
Je suis Kadia Toukonate. Je profite de cette occasion de la Journée mondiale de l'éducation, lancer un message très fort qui est celui d'investir dans l'éducation, car c'est le seul instrument qui nous permettra de braver les difficultés, transformer les rêves en réalité, aller à l'avant, transformer les problèmes en opportunités, mais aussi trouver des solutions adéquates pour le changement du monde. Pensez-vous que les 617 millions d'enfants qui ne partent pas à l'école, allaient trouver des solutions adéquates pour changer le monde? Pensez-vous que si les enfants et les femmes avaient l'opportunité nécessaire d'investir dans l'éducation, allons-nous être encore là? Non, jamais. Ensemble, nous pouvons changer les choses et je lance un message. Et je remercie la directrice générale de l'UNESCO de m'avoir offert cette occasion pour lancer mon message très très fort à l'endroit des enfants.
Sorry, colleagues, as we're a little behind time, we might try and get started on the second panel. Okay, colleagues, we're going to start the second multi-stakeholder panel, and we're going to hear from stakeholders from the State of New York, the private sector, and educational organizations working on a global and local scale. So I'm going to give the floor first to Pamela Haas, Corporate Citizenship Manager at IBM.
Thank you.
Sorry, the other person isn't there.
That's okay.
So again, I'd ask for attention for Pamela Haas.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here to represent IBM, and we are honored to be here as part of the International Day of Education. And IBM is over 100 years old. How many companies can say that, right? And today I really want to share with you information about the P-TECH 9 through 14 school model, which IBM launched in 2011. It's a high school with a focus on college and career readiness for all. Increasingly, the jobs of the 21st century are neither blue collar nor white collar, but new collar, meaning jobs that require post-secondary training or credentialing, but not necessarily a traditional 4-year college degree. Some of the technology industry's fastest growing fields are new collar fields, including careers in cybersecurity, cloud computing, digital design, and AI development. P-TECH builds the talent for new collar jobs. P-TECH was designed to break the cycle of poverty and address skills gaps in the labor force by linking education and workforce development. P-TECH's goal is to prepare young people for academic achievement and economic opportunity regardless of their backgrounds. Students at P-TECH schools graduate with both their high school diploma and an industry-recognized 2-year post-secondary degree within a 6-year time period. Upon graduation, they can continue their educations or be hired into a competitive job in a growing STEM field, including IT, healthcare, and advanced manufacturing. What sets the P-TECH model apart is the partnership between K-12, higher education, and industry, each integrating their expertise to ensure that students, many of whom are the first in their families to go to college, graduate with a degree that matters in the 21st century economy. P-TECH features integrated high school and coursework and a range of workplace experiences. P-TECH schools are open enrollment, and the degree is provided for free. Upon graduation, students are first in line for jobs with their employee partners. To ensure students graduate career ready, industry partners provide a comprehensive set of focused workplace experiences that include worksite visits, mentoring, job shadowing, and paid internships. These experiences are integrated into the academic curriculum and are definitely game changers. For many young people, mentoring is particularly important. Mentors help students recognize their strengths, keep them focused on big goals, and offer targeted advice and guidance. Paid internships are turning points. Students are in real workplaces, integrated into teams on skill-based projects, honing their technical skills while building the professional skills that IBM and all employers want, such as communication, problem solving, critical thinking, and adaptability. Students may be terrified at first of their managers, but by the end of their internships, they are hosting team meetings and presenting their work to executives. P-TECH has taken root in more than 110 schools across the US and globally in Australia, Ireland, Singapore, Hong Kong, and it's growing. IBM leads 11 schools and more than 550 other businesses, many working in consortiums, are serving as lead industry partners. To date, IBM schools have had more than 185 graduates, some of whom completed their 6-year programs in 3.5 years. Our effort with P-TECH have informed us a great deal about how to create meaningful business and educational partnerships. P-TECH started with a hypothesis and a core set of tenets. Like the scientific method, we implemented, reviewed, and shared data, and then we went back and continually improve upon our work. It is incumbent upon us all, government, business, education, to collaborate, do the hard work, to never be satisfied, to create game-changing pathways to meaningful career readiness for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we, of course, in Ireland, we know IBM well. We've had a good relationship over many years. And again, this focus on the need for lifelong learning and training and upskilling is so important, and it's something we're very aware of as well in Ireland, and I know many are. We heard on the video, for those of you who could hear it, Alice Albright earlier, but from the Global Partnership for Education. But we have here Alex Palacios with us, so you have the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. very pleased to be among such a special group of speakers and partners. I represent a partnership which includes so many organizations that have already spoken both this morning at the breakfast for the Friends of Education, but also in these panels. And to us, International Education Day really means partnership. It's our middle name, and we have such an ambitious goal with the SDGs that they won't be reached without partnership. They won't be reached without effective partnership and mobilized partnership. We are the only partnership in Global Fund dedicated exclusively to ensuring a quality basic education for the most vulnerable in 67 of the world's poorest countries. We have committed over $5 billion to those countries, 50% of which are fragile and or conflict affected. And our goal is to continue to mobilize those partners to work very effectively at country level as well as working at global level to ensure that we're making the best use of the resources that we do have. Very mindful of the fact that this morning the figure of $40 billion was first mentioned. That's the gap that has to be filled if we're to achieve the SDG. And it's going to take a lot of advocacy. It's going to take a lot of effective, increasingly effective partnership to be able to not only close that gap, but to make sure that the resources are being used, both domestic and international, very well over the coming years. So the GPE model is really around working with developing country partners and governments to align them behind national strategies. We bring everyone together at country level, including donors, local civil society, think tanks, teachers are at the center, and private sector and foundations. This approach has led, in fact, over the last 16 years, to 77 million more children in primary school, and that's actually something that we think is very important. We recognize that there are huge gaps, many millions of children, 60 million children not in school, primary age. We need to think about the success that we've achieved. We need to communicate that success because communicating success helps generate more support. But obviously, what we've done is not yet enough, and much more needs to be done. What really keeps me up at night is the fact that 50% of the children who are in school are not learning, 50%. We have to address this learning crisis. And this is what I think we all need to think about on International Education Day. It's not just a matter of giving more money to pay more teachers or build more schools, but of ensuring accountability and focusing on results right through the whole education system. At GPE, we are committed to improving learning and equity through strong education systems. To help drive better outcomes, GPE has a results-based funding model which requires countries to demonstrate significant results in equity, efficiency, and learning outcomes. GPE's approach to working in partnership is critical to the transformation of education systems and tackling the learning crisis. Business as usual will not get us to where we need to be in 2030. The Rohingya was mentioned earlier. In Bangladesh, where GPE collaborated with humanitarian and development partners to ensure that the immediate education needs of the Rohingya refugees were met, while we were also focusing on the longer-term goal of strengthening their education systems. GPE support to the government complemented funding by Education Cannot Wait and built on the effort of organizations, partners such as UNICEF, UNHCR, Save the Children, which also have been providing education support to the Rohingya children. We heard from Alice a little bit earlier about her upcoming visit to Sierra Leone. 97% of the students score 0 in school. GPE is helping the government tackle this learning crisis in partnership with the European Union, DFID, UNICEF, the World Bank, and other NGOs, while also strengthening the policy dialogue and improving accountability by supporting the creation of a civil society coalition for education. For GPE, as Alice said, the International Education Day should really help create that global solidarity so that we can ensure that all children are in school and learning, so we can accomplish the SDGs. We need to broaden the community of voices that is supporting this sector. We have a kind of likely assemblage of partners obviously interested. I'm not surprised to see some of the parties in this room, but I'm really excited to see IBM here. I'm excited to see foundations. I think we need to ensure that these influential voices are being heard, and we have to facilitate that as a group of partners working together. Military leaders, former secretaries of state, who can make the case, at times even more effectively, particularly with some more slightly conservative governments, that these are very important investments and that they yield results. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and I know we have your colleague Sinead here with us, so we're delighted about that. Ireland is proud to partner with GP in the very important work you do around the world. I think one point that really struck me was that statistic of 50% not learning, and again, it's really about that point. It's not only about access, it's about quality and investing in education and the resources we have. Next, we have Kate Lapham from the Education Support Programme at Open Society Foundations.
So thanks very much. So I'd like to break from tradition a little bit and start by sharing a personal story, because I think that the beginning of a commitment to education for all is rooted many times in our own experiences of education. I can remember the day in high school when my sister, who is profoundly deaf, was able to come into my school system for the first time. And I remember how scared I was that my friends would make fun of her and would not accept her, and how proud I was when they did. That experience is the root of my personal motivation to advocate for the right to education everywhere throughout the world. And it is the reason why I choose to work for an organization that believes education is the cornerstone of an open society, that it is the threshold right that makes the realization of all other rights possible, and that it is what allows us to be citizens, to participate in civic activity, to participate in our societies, and to participate in our economies. And for this reason, I also take issue with the statistic of 50% of children who are in school and not learning. It's true that 50% of children are in school and not learning anything that we would associate with a formal curriculum that involves reading or mathematics, that involves history or civics. But children learn, and what those 50% of children are learning is that the adults who are responsible for helping them realize their right to education are not up to that task, that they are not important enough members of their communities to have access to schools that give them hope for the future and the ability to participate. It makes them feel other, it makes them feel excluded and alienated, and they learn that that is the way that their life trajectory will be. That is simply not acceptable. That is the death knell of an open society. It is the beginning of conflict, of migration, of disenfranchisement, and of lost generations. And we as a collective group must work together to stop that at all costs. As we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and we think about the true importance of cognitive skills and academic learning, of critical thinking, of being able to participate in the labor force, we also need to think about Target 4.7, the last one that sometimes gets left off the list, that by 2030, we must ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and the skills needed to promote sustainable development, and I would argue also open societies. These are the acquaintance and the internal feeling of human rights, of gender equity, a promotion of culture of peace and nonviolence, and of global citizenship. These are the skills that will help us in the next century make sure that our planet remains a livable place, that our societies are open, and ultimately that our children are happy. So it is absolutely my honor and my pleasure to be speaking in this room, and the Open Society Foundations congratulates all of the member states who were able to achieve this wonderful day of education. We're ready to work with you, and we wish you all success in the future.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your story. I think for any of us who spend long in meetings here at the UN, I think it's always personal testimonies which are the most striking and the most interesting to listen to. And I'm particularly struck by your comments on the 50% statistic, and it brings me back to the presentation earlier by Brandon Fleming. And, you know, this idea that we need to make sure that within a classroom there are the resources, the skills and the time to make sure that each child is reaching its potential, no matter what their circumstances. Next we have on our list, we have Christo Thomas is next. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellency, the moderator. I know we have a Q&A, but I would like to ask you all a question. Why we picked January 24th as International Day of Education, if anyone knows? Today marks the 73rd anniversary of the first resolution ever adopted by the United Nations, designed the establishment of a commission to deal with the problem raised by the discovery of atomic energy. It is a day of special significance in terms of the UN taking bold steps to overcome limitations in human understanding in the face of pressing concern. Yesterday, the state of New York, the first provincial government in the entire world, made history with accordance to the International Day of Education. I'm not an official spokesman of New York State Assembly. They passed a resolution adopting International Day of Education. So unfortunately, Assembly member who actually led the resolution couldn't attend. I mean, she's still stuck, but it is an honor for us also to be associated with her. So if every member state takes that lead, I think it will be very easy to promote International Day of Education around the world. New York State have done it. We demonstrate our appreciation by working not only adopt, by implementing the International Day of Education. Collegiate Congress was founded and is operated by elected student leaders and remains committed to the implementation of student-centric programming. We have developed a project called Master Plan, befitting the importance of education, focused on two interrelated goals, or we call fundamental objectives. One is the global implementation of International Day of Education. Second, the promoting and supporting of UN SDGs, especially 4, 5, 11, 13, and 16. When we come to the first part, which is the global implementation, we have reached out to almost over 100 stakeholders in academia. We have our good friend from British Columbia here from the Youth Parliament. I also appreciate the former ambassador of Canada to China, who also runs the vice chair of the largest K-12 institution in China. They celebrated International Day of Education in all their institutions. Thank you very much, Excellency. The project born of these 5 SDGs could guide the International Day of Education for years to come. Among those we have identified and are eager to help develop include: 1, fostering of dialogue between educators worldwide towards global collaboration and sharing of best practices. 2, creation of an umbrella organization for student governments from grade 8 onwards in order to promote civic involvement in young people. 3rd, creation of a student committee to research and develop projects surrounding an annual educational theme to be showcased at the next January 24th. For this project, which we call Master Plan, we envision a team of 160 delegates from around the world, generally between the age of 21 and 35. They will be divided in 4 categories. 1 are student leaders, 2nd organization elected leaders, 3rd corporate sector, and 4th celebrities. Celebrities is a combo. We have invited and requested sportsmen and artists also to be part of that the team. There will be an advisory committee. By an advisory committee is comprised of senior UN diplomats and 5 to 6 member state permanent representatives. Although still early, the preliminary interest we have received have been enthusiastic and for each aforementioned component. And this whole project globally will be run by corporate sector. They also have extended their support. I conclude by respectfully requesting following 2 proposals to be considered by the UNGA, possible objectives to value this day. 1, collaboration of UN member states towards the universal adoption of tuition-free education till undergrad college by agreed upon deadline. 2nd, promoting of civics and social studies education. When everyone, even our good friend from the Teachers Association, I was a former intern of AFL-CIO, we should understand that education was a service long time ago. Now it has become a commodity. We collectively, member states and everyone, must actually focus to bring it back as a service. Then all these discrimination won't be possible, will not be possible actually. NGOs have a long and storied history aiding the United Nations. We at Collegiate Congress are proud to continue this tradition and thank the 73rd General Assembly for the support. And happy birthday to the International Day of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Christo, and it's so important that we hear student voices, that students are engaged, young people who are involved in the education process, and the work your group does in making sure that happens is really important. It's important in and of itself that we have the voices of those affected inputting into the debate, but also that young people get that sense that they can be involved in civic discussions and that they can make a difference. And you've laid down a couple of challenges for us there at the UN as well. Our final speaker today is Denise Williams. Denise co-founded and is president of the Silicon Valley Nigeria Economic Development Group and has been a champion of education and girls' education in particular. So Denise, you have the floor.
My name is Denise Mobolaji Ajayi Williams. I am the president and co-founder of Silicon Valley Nigerian Economic Development, a minority women-owned organization in Silicon Valley. And lucky for me, my co-founder is my mother, Chief Temitope Ajayi, who is a bulldozer, to say the least. Education is not a choice, it is a human right. At the age of 33, I sit here in front of you as a success story demonstrating the building blocks of the value of education and early childhood literacy. In the 5th grade, I began my journey in STEM, science, technology, math, engineering. Excuse me. Building robots and learning techniques in engineering, mathematics is the foundation of STEM. Science is just as important and the critical element into understanding health. But how can my fellow brothers and sisters in emerging markets and developing worlds going to have access to educational fulfillment when basic fundamentals for survivals are not being met? So we fast forward to engage the use of technology to help combat the challenge of distance and time. We use technology in education to engage future app developers, computer scientists, programmers, developing and training a large workforce on becoming entrepreneurs for their dreams, just as mine. Job creators for the future and solution finders for active disparities throughout the global map. A day such as this, International Day of Education, is about someone like myself. It's about the young lady sitting with the scarf around their neck. It's about the people who traveled and journeyed here. It's about all of us in this room. We should use this day to make the case to provide the basic services such as electricity, potable running water, free school lunch, a much needed program in emerging market and developing countries. These basic services should also be included because they are part of the ingredients for the excellence in educational standards. When you go to school in the United States, you qualify for free lunch. If you go to school in Nigeria, you may not have breakfast, lunch, or dinner. How are you going to remember what you learned? How are you going to be able to be an entrepreneur? How are you going to be able to dream about the future when you're worried about the food on your plate? So I'm not just focusing on education. I want the whole plate. I want electricity, same standard globally for everyone. I want running water, so that if I decide to take my children to go to school in Nigeria, they can use the facilities there. And I also want them to have free lunches, because that's just basic. In a recent article published by CNBC, it states, in our rapidly changing, hyper-connected world, the information and communication technology industry is driving economic growth, innovation, and job creation. It's also where jobs are. We must acknowledge the digital skills gap. Although young people aged 15 to 24 represent 17% of the global population, the youth accounts for 40% of the world's unemployed. The global youth unemployment rate was calculated at 13.1% in 2013, with 73 million young people jobless worldwide, according to the International Labor Organization. Furthermore, recent estimate indicates that almost 1/3 of the youth between the ages of 15 and 29 are inactive. That is, they are NEETs, not in education, not in employment, and not in training. As the president and co-founder of Silicon Valley Nigerian Economic Development, it is a personal goal of mine to duplicate myself. My success story is highly attributed to the teachers and mentors who have committed to securing higher education and quality education for my professional and academic development. And now it is my opportunity to pay it forward. Through the immersion program that we host, economic summits and infotech, ag tech programs, fintech programs, we are charged to train, certify, and pair talent with employers for youth from all around the world in the field of information communication technology. On this International Day of Education, I celebrate with everyone in this room because everyone in this room has access to a young adult, has access to people in developing countries. Those are the ones that you need to pay it forward to. I'm not just sitting on this stage because my mom is here. I really have something to say. All right. I celebrate and ask the audience to look to the left to see my young daughter, Ginger Grace 2, and my son, Hayden Williams IV 8, who have been escorted out, but as they witness their mother become an example to them and taking a position on just for their future, not just for their future, but the future of other children from Nigeria, from Singapore, from state of Qatar, from Ireland. I thank you all for this opportunity, and I thank you all for recognizing the need to make quality education a priority as we meet the goal come 2030. And when I say 2030, I want running water and electricity at every elementary school globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise, and thank you for bringing us that intergenerational approach. It's important, and it's in fact something that Mary Robinson speaks a lot about. She was on the video earlier. I think, again, you know, taking from your remarks, this need for investment in education in schools, it's not just building a building or putting teachers in place, it takes a lot more, and also that we have to have the same level of ambition wherever kids are in the world. So thank you for that. We have time for some questions, so again, maybe we'll take a couple, and if you just quickly say who you are and keep the question brief. Yeah.
So my name is Adriana Tom. I'm from Canada, and I'm also someone who's been fortunate enough to complete secondary school and attend university. And there's different scales of change and different scales of action, and we've talked a lot about structural change at the government level, institutional level, corporate level. But as a student and as an individual in a position of privilege, what are tangible steps for action that I can take in my day-to-day life in order to promote access to quality education for all?
Okay, thank you. I might take.
Margaret O'Dwyer, Company of the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, part of the Vincentian family, coming from 10 years in the Cook Islands, where I worked with literacy and numeracy for people who were incarcerated. Many incarcerated people are not adults, many are minors. I'm talking about throughout the world. Can you comment about what kind of projects there may exist to partner to help make sure that people who are incarcerated can gain self-esteem, employability skills, and success when they are released? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Yu Sanin. I'm a Goodwill Ambassador and Ambassador for Geography Well. I just come from the Caribbean, try to assist the needy, just carry 1,700 boxes of medical supplies, educational supplies, and goods for the people. As we all know, education is the key to success. And not only that, education contributes to other sustainable development, because once a country is well educated, there will not be poverty, there will not be fight, there will not be war. However, I realize by traveling to many countries in the world that education, which is a human right, is being violated. We all know there's about 600 million people, young kids who do not attend school, without 600 million who do not read. But there are many countries like Haiti, which is a very poor country, and then there are few people who have struggled to attend school. They study law, they study business administration, medical field and stuff. But when they come to US or any other big country, the license are not recognized. They have to work at the McDonald's, Wendy's, they have to do dishwashers and many bad job in order for them to survive while they are well educated. So this is a violation of human rights. And in the other side, any professional from the US, from Canada or France can travel to any other country, poor country, Africa, Haiti, and then the license are recognized and they can do whatever they want. And those poor country, they cannot come with the license and work in the US or those countries. Now, what must be done to resolve this problem? Because this is a violation of human rights.
Okay, thank you. So we've 3 questions there. I don't know if colleagues want to take, if someone wants to take one of them on the tangible steps that an individual can take, which is a very good. Someone looking to step up, projects to help the incarcerated, or this issue about recognition of qualifications. Did you want?
First question from our friend from Canada, I think. Is that right? Yes. There are a number, we work very closely with a number of very successful, very smart, very good advocacy partners. I would suggest just 3 off the top of my head. My colleague Sinead right behind you can give you some advice. Global Citizen is a fantastic advocacy organization with many affiliates around the world. One.org organization originally was called Data, founded by Bono, and then Results, which has a chapter in Canada and various affiliates throughout Canada. So if you contact any one of those, I'm sure that they'll find ways that you'll find that you can contribute to the cause.
Thank you. I think those were all excellent questions, all 3 of them. To the young lady who wants to know what I would recommend for you to do, it's to vote. Vote in every single election where you have the right to, even the off-term ones that make you late for work. Encourage your friends to do that. Help other people who can't get to the polls get there, and make contact with your elected representatives afterwards so that they understand how important the right to education is to you. I think that is the single most powerful thing you can do. And if I can also, I'd like to address the question of incarceration for a moment. It is absolutely important that correctional systems offer opportunities to the people who are incarcerated to have better lives when they leave than they did when they entered. But let's work together to make sure people don't enter that system. We know that in most of our countries, incarcerated populations have disproportionate representation from communities of color, for people with disabilities, and people who have mental health challenges. Let's invest in the early childhood education and public health systems that keep people from coming into the criminal justice system in the first place, so that we don't have to ask that question anymore.
Yeah, so for our young friend from Canada, I'm going to take a little different tack here, and I'm going to suggest that you and everybody you know volunteer, and that you give something back in the schools in your communities. So a little bit of a commercial. I'm the only corporate person here, but we have a lot of web-based tools that are free. They're free for you, they're free for teachers, they're free for educators, and educational foundations. I'd be happy to give you all those links. You can, certainly Google IBM activity kits or skills build, and you can find activities that you can do in schools. There's something called Teachers Try Science, very easy to find online, and Kids Try Science. Anything that engages youth and gives them access to people like you who have a level of education and you don't look like anybody in their family, and you're giving something back to them, and you're giving them the opportunity. So I suggest volunteering.
Just add that there is, of course, a UN volunteering system you could look up online as well. A little ad for the house here. Yeah.
And this is peer-to-peer advice because we're all evolving. My number one advice would be to duplicate yourself. That's the best thing you can do for the world, is to make another you and make 10 other yous and make 20 other yous. Another example I have is we are in the presence of the Black Silicon Valley Chambers of Commerce, Mr. Carl Davis Jr., and he has a concerted effort in hosting Black Techathons, youth coding camps, that takes place periodically, giving children in undeserved neighborhoods the opportunity to enter into technology and learning how to code. So these are very small but huge examples of how by reaching back you can really change the next generation ahead.
If you wanted very briefly, because we're just out of time.
Can you hear this? As she said, my name is Carl Davis Jr., and I'm the president of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce. What I want to say is, first, keep hope alive. Although somebody else maybe made that phrase a little more famous than me, I want to paint that picture here because what I see in this room is a lot of resources that I want to ask the committee here who's orchestrating this, how can we all stay connected? Because in Silicon Valley, what we found out is relationships and where we're all going and what we do. And when we align with other people who think like we do and want to work like we do, a lot of things happen very exponentially. So is there a way that someone here can keep us all connected if we all have registered or get emails or want to connect with one another? Can you guys do that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea of looking at a way we can connect, and we can talk to the organisers as well to try and make sure that happens. It's a good idea to have that connections and to build on these relationships and meetings here. It isn't just a meeting and we all go away and do our own thing. And we're really out of time now. I know that this gentleman's question wasn't answered, and it's not really for me to answer it, but just in terms of recognition of qualifications, it is something that's really important. It's something that countries really have to work on together with international organizations and groups to make sure that people can use their skills when they go abroad. I know it's an ongoing challenge for governments and state systems, but it's something, and as you say, if it's impacting more on some states than others, then that's something that isn't right and should be addressed. I think, I wasn't going to give the floor again, but I think Denise's mother was looking for the floor earlier, were you? So if so, you're welcome. A last comment? No?
Yeah, I want to use this opportunity to thank everybody. I'm the happiest 63 years old woman here, a grandmother, and this has been my vision. This has been my life. I am the other woman. I am one of the unsung heroes, unknown. But I want to use this opportunity to thank United Nations and everybody present in this room, because you really have the genuine love and passion to move education globally. Now, I saw this picture. I see one of the next kid as Bill Gates. I'm a Silicon Valley woman, I'm sorry. Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. All we need to have is an opportunity, especially in Africa. I'm appealing to every soul here. Why we're here is divine. We're here because of the generation yet unborn. Let's start turning promises into action. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much, and great words to close out this panel on. We're going to have Jamie Gilmore to play a little music for us in a couple of minutes, just to close the meeting. So I would ask you all to remain seated. It's been a real honour for us to be involved in this, and once again we want to pay tribute to the leadership of Nigeria in bringing forward the International Day of Education. It simply wouldn't have happened without them. So a round of applause for Nigeria. And of course, for all the work done by the ambassador and the team in the mission, but in particular Alex and David, who I know worked so hard on this within the mission. We're also delighted as well to have here the gender champion Raelia from Kenya. So good to have you here. And of course, we have my dear colleague Koki here as well, who's going to do so much hard work for us on the Commission on Status of Women a little later in the year. But thank you all again for being here, for being so engaged, and a big appreciation also to our panelists here now and to our other panelists. So a round of applause for the panelists, and then Jamie Gilmore will take us out.
Before I begin, oh, that is loud. Before I begin, I just want to thank you all, everyone involved, for this amazing opportunity. As a student, it's so inspiring and motivating to see everyone care so much about the education of my generation and future generations. So I'm very happy to be here and share my music with you. Thank you. Iona, on white wings strong and free. Hold on, that's out of tune. The weather is not my friend with the harp today. We're gonna forget that for a little bit. Okay. Iona, on white wings strong and free. She's soaring joyously, the wind rushing past. And on the sandy beach, I see her standing there, mist tangled in her hair, her heart's home at last. Wind from Iona, bring her to me again, my sister and my friend, across the wild sea. Wind from Iona, be her voice soft and clear, to one she once held dear, whisper to me. I cannot call her back, her heart has found its home. Now I must grieve alone for one who is gone. But on a summer's night, let her come sit by me. We'll talk endlessly of things we have done. Wind from Iona, bring her to me again, my sister and my friend, across the wild sea. Wind from Iona, carry her greeting warm, where she lies safe from harm, across the wild sea. Thank you.